Sekeres Price for Wednesday, July 24th, 2024. Coming out from the Nation Network studio built by Arbor Lee here at the iconic Wall Center, downtown Vancouver. And if you want a meeting space that sets the tone for productive business events, contact the team at the Wall Center to learn more. Sales at wallcenter.com. Irfan Ghaffar sitting in for Blake Price today. Gritty Sass hitting switches, conducting things. Big show coming up. A lot of Canucks conversation this week, Irf.
There's a lot of stuff happening.
Right. Lots of stuff happening.
Jim Rutherford speaking.
Rutherford, Talkett, Sprong.
Yeah.
And Canada with a massive scandal already before the torch is even illuminated there in Paris. We'll get to it, but we'll start with our poll question. How worried are you about Thatcher Demco's health holding up? You can vote very, somewhat, mildly, or not at all. Do so at the Sekeres Price X.com or YouTube channels. Give you the first answer here, my dude. What do you think? How worried are you about Demco's health?
In between somewhat and very. And I say this because, you know, he's had the summer now to rehab and rehabilitate and get better. But in the back of my mind, in the back of most fans' minds, he's never been able to be healthy when you need him the most. And I think that that's the knock on Thatcher Demko right now. Heading into this season, yes, you have Artur Shilovs now. He's going to be the backup goalie for the Vancouver Canucks. How much is he going to play? Is he going to play a lot? I think he's going to need to play a lot. And I also think that Four Nations tournament is going to come into a big factor. I think if Thatcher Demko has the Vezina caliber season that he did to start the season last year, there's no doubt in my mind that he's going to be the starter for Team USA. So that's
really over Hellebuck.
Over Hellebuck.
Yeah.
I definitely do think that. And I think the workload is going to be there. Yes, I get it. It's going to be tight, an all-star game type. No, it's not. These guys are going to want to play for their country. The USA is going to want to beat Team Canada. Like, you look at USA's roster up against Canada, they have some incredible talent on that team. And, you know, anytime anyone puts on that crest or that jersey of representing your country, it's going to mean a lot more. So very interesting to see how that kind of plays out in February, but you got to give them the rest early, I think.
Yeah. I voted very, and I voted very because you have the president of hockey operations talking about how he's got to change the way he works between games.
Yeah.
They went after an experienced goaltender at the 11th hour in free agency and weren't able to land one, tried to re-sign Casey DeSmith, settled for Yuri Patera. He's finished two of the last three seasons on IR, and he missed a huge swath of the middle season. So I mean, when last we heard, he was going to be available to play against Dallas, right, in the Western Conference Final. And yet the storyline of Thatcher Demco's health continues to trickle into the season. And when you have managers like Jim Rutherford speaking as they did about Thatcher Demco, yeah, that puts my antenna up. So let's get to it. It's our top story. Jim Rutherford joining the Bob McCown podcast with our friend John Shannon, and John's on the program here a little later, speaking on Thatcher Demco and the adjustments that are going to be required in order to preserve his good health and decrease his workload. This is courtesy of the Bob McCown podcast. Take a listen.
I think there needs to be some adjustments in how he approaches his workouts. He is probably the hardest working guy that I've ever seen. I mean, he's on the ice before the players come on the ice. He's works. He's probably put in enough work when he works directly with Ian Clark before the players come on the ice. So maybe between Thatcher and Ian and Rick Tocchet, looking at how much work he's putting in between games might be able to help him, because I just think he pushes himself too hard.
Well, you could give him some of your old regimes, you know, your old routines in Detroit and Pittsburgh. You know, you could do that.
Yeah, needless to say, goaltending has changed quite a bit since Jim Rutherford was in the league 50 years ago. You want it in there.
Yeah, it's interesting because Thatcher Demko does put in that work. Like it's evident. It's before games. He's out there early. Practices the one-on-one drills. He does that early to get his mind and his body right for what he believes is a game. It's not necessarily the work he's putting in for practice. There's been oftentimes where Demko won't practice. So is it the work that he is putting in before practice and maybe going to stop 5 or 6 pucks? Is it that, or is it the intensity of it? And I think that if you're going to tell a guy who's worked like this and gotten to this point his entire life of putting in this work, and this is the thing that he knows to, hey, maybe lay off a little bit. Like, I think there's more room for injury to happen then, because that's how you know how to prepare your body.
Even if it isn't more room for injury, Irf. And look, it sounds like a simple enough fix, right?
Yeah.
Hey, just dial it back a little bit between games, on off days or on practice days. And in workout sessions, of course, Ian Clark has a reputation as a taskmaster. He's going to work his guys, right? Like, that's part of his program.
I went to his goalie school when I was younger and half decent and stopping pucks. That was a hell of a week.
Oh, I'm sure. So it sounds simple enough, but Irf brings up one good point, and I'm going to add to it. Does Thatcher feel like that's what he has to do to be physically ready? And then secondly, if you do get him to dial it back, then where is he psychologically, emotionally in his preparedness, knowing he is doing less now? Like, it should be a transition that you're able to sell to him and that he should be able to handle. Like, hey, you're an established NHL starter now and Vezina Trophy candidate. You know, now it's about tweaking things to be as good as you can be for as many games as we can get out of you, as opposed to needing to prove yourself, build yourself up, all the different things that he had as part of his program, part of his routine to get to this level. So it's a delicate balance.
Yep.
It's one that should be attainable. Rick Tocchet spoke to The Athletic, and we'll get into this in a second, but that's why he said that's why we've gone to the practice goalie, that Thatcher would do his workout with Ian Clark before practice, before the players, the skaters got on the ice, and then they would throw a practice goalie in net alongside the backup. Tocchet wouldn't commit to a game number for Demko in this interview.
Yeah. It's going to be tough, right? The guy's going to want to play, and you're going to want him playing his best in March, April, and hopefully longer than that if you're them. So is it going to be near 50, 55? And, you know, is Shilov's going to be the guy that gets the rest? But I think another thing is, you know, you talk about the on ice workout and things like that, and dialing it back, because that's where you're going to get your injuries, on the ice if you're working out too much. Like, they might have to go to a point and be like, you're not going on the ice today.
Yeah.
Like, if you're going to do your stuff with Ian Clark, it's video and it's that kind of stuff. You already know, like you just mentioned, Matt, this guy's a Vezina caliber goalie. He knows how to play goalie in the National Hockey League, and he's a pretty good one. So is it now, don't be on the ice? And it's more so the mental part of the game.
And you know, I've seen the injuries referred to as fluke, and sure enough,
still injuries.
You can chalk them up to that. I mean, the one in the playoffs just looks so benign. It just looks so innocuous. And to think that could cost them the amount of games that it cost him. Anyways, that will be a huge storyline to follow with these Vancouver Canucks in season 24-25. Another will be Elias Pettersson. How he bounces back from a difficult second half and postseason, how he responds to what was seemingly a difference of opinion between himself and the organization in terms of how injured he was, how much that knee tendonitis affected him. And of course, now with better line mates, one would think. Jake DeBrusk skating on his wing as opposed to the revolving cast of characters, none of them outside of Nils Höglander truly up to the task last season, and even Höglander in the playoffs was a problem. So here's Jim Rutherford discussing Elias Pettersson, what he learned this past season and the path forward.
I would expect Daniel Henrik to spend a lot of time with Elias. Is that fair?
Well, they'll spend some time with him, certainly, and the respect works both ways between the player and the twins. But yeah, I mean, Pettersson had a good regular season, and he he learned from the playoffs. This is part of learning. When you get in the playoffs, you don't have nearly as much room and as much time to do things. And he admits that himself. And he'll be well prepared from that learning experience. He was got a lot more attention from the opposition, and now he has to learn how to react to that. But
Right.
this is, with this format of the playoffs compared to COVID, this is the first time, our good young players have been through that. But even when you take some top players that play in the playoffs every year, 5 years in a row, 6 years in a row, they could get to a point where they have an off playoff. So I'm not overly concerned about it. This is a very talented player that cares about the team, and Petey will be fine.
And again, that's courtesy of the Bob McCown podcast. Look, more just a recap there from Rutherford. Nothing earth-shaking, if you ask me. That said, couple it with the Rick Tocchet interview with Thomas Drance on The Athletic, where Tocchet readily admits, look, part of it is on us. We did not get him enough wingers. Even said he took a bullet for the team by, having that rotating cast of wingers. But at the same time, Tocchet mentions he's got to do some stuff on his own, sharpen his game. Interestingly, Irf, he talked about he's still building the relationship and trust with Pettersson.
Yeah.
A year and a third, a year and a half later, and that is still an ongoing process. He mentioned that he's got knowledge for Petey, but that it's got to be received. And he said he also wants him to come into his office, Tocchet's office, and share ideas and ask for things. Look, I'm still not convinced that Tocchet and Pettersson are on the same page. I'm still not convinced that Pettersson is the most coachable player. Kind of likes to be left alone.
Yep.
Right.
He's a different dude. Like he's not like your modern day, everyday run of the mill NHL guy who's going to go in the coach's office and say things and be the first guy on the ice and the last guy off the ice. He's a hell of a hockey player. He put up 89 points in 82 games last season for the Vancouver Canucks, was healthy all year. Yes. Okay. There's some question of the playoffs and some, disagreement as to what this injury was and the severity of it. But Elias Pettersson's just different. And I think that everyone in the organization is now starting to know that a little bit more. And I think that when you look at it now, we're going to have to look at it from a standpoint of, okay, yeah, he's a little bit different. Yeah, he wasn't very good in the playoffs, but now you gave all this money to him.
Yeah.
And because of that, you're going to be under the microscope a lot more now.
Yeah, I think so. And look, I think he's got to be more coachable. I think he's got to be more receptive. I think he's got to be less aloof, less aggrieved. Some of the attitudinal issues and body language that we saw in the second half and through the postseason, which weren't helpful. I also think that the burden of not having the contract talk around him may be helpful for Elias. And I also think
the contract was signed well before the playoffs started.
No, I understand, but as we all know, he got bullied to that negotiation table.
Yes.
Like, he was willing to sit it out and wait the season, and between the Canucks pushing him and the offer, if it wasn't phantom, from Carolina and his agent saying, hey, let's get this to the table and get this done. So I don't think last year went the way Elias wanted it to go with regards to that contract. And I do wonder if, not having to hear about, an extension this year. I mean, I still think he'll hear about the contract, but not having to hear about the extension this year might be beneficial to him. I also think he's got to drop the rabbit ears a little bit, and just focus in and play a little more. And interestingly, the Canucks, as Tocchet acknowledged, they sent their strength coach to Sweden.
Yep.
So I think that's also you need a big summer. You need to get better in different ways. You need to be stronger and harder on pucks going forward. There's a lot there. Of course, getting Jake DeBrusk could be an absolute coup for Elias and unlocking more of those talents, because it is not a lack of talent here. That is the issue. And he's going to be a fascinating guy to follow through the season. And look, Irf, if it all doesn't come together for Elias Pettersson and this coaching staff and this management group this season, I do wonder how much we'll be talking about trade in the spring leading up to that no move clause kicking in on July 1st. Because look, the Vancouver Canucks have a full season now, a few weeks shy of a year, to determine whether Elias Pettersson can be a frontline player on a Stanley Cup champion or just a very good player who piles up a lot of good points in the regular season.
It's an interesting conversation because you're going to look at it and say, whatever Elias Pettersson does in this regular season, this fan base and the people that watch this team and most that do in the National Hockey League that cover the Vancouver Canucks and watch, you're going to say it doesn't mean anything unless you do and perform in the playoffs, just because of how, I don't know, invisible, but he kind of was, for lack of a better word, in the playoffs, right? It wasn't that engaged in some of those games. Yeah, there was the one game he kind of ran around and hit a couple people, but even then, right, he just wasn't that same guy. He wasn't deceptive on the puck. He wasn't moving his feet. He wasn't taking an initiative. He wasn't shooting the puck. Elias Pettersson gets paid to put the puck in the net, right? And they're going to need that from him. If they're not getting that from him in the postseason, it's going to be tough for guys like Brock Besser, Quinn Hughes, Jake DeBrusk to carry that load. Like, they need him to be the guy that they gave north of $90 million to in the playoffs.
Our top story, a presentation of Yellow Dog Brewing, Neighborhood Brewing, Yellow Dog Spirits and Foolish Winery, and a new beer release here from Neighborhood, the Lake Monster West Coast IPA. Legend has it something lurks beneath the surface. It's light and crispy, yet loaded with Strata Citra hops on tap. Go to the tasting room, available in select locations across BC. That's Lake Monster West Coast IPA. Daniel Sprong, Jim Rutherford dealt with Daniel Sprong as well. The Vancouver Canucks recent signing, the winger ex of the Detroit Red Wings. Let's hear from Jim Rutherford on not just where Sprong could fit, but the project before the coaching staff and Daniel Sprong to make him a more complete NHL player.
That was just a little bit of it. I mean, a lot of time has gone by since then. We're certainly familiar with the player and him personally, but, he's played with a few teams since that. We follow him like we follow all players. And, you talk about, can he play on the second or third or whatever line? I mean, we like to have a balanced forward line, and he could play on the first line depending on the chemistry of that line and how many guys on that line are aware of the puck on the defensive side of it. So that's an area where we would like our guys to work with him and see if we could improve that by 10 or 20%. And if that's possible, we're going to have a complete player, a very good player.
Yeah. Look, I don't dispute that the guy has offensive talents here. I do wonder whether, as a market, particularly because he comes along here in late July when there's not a whole lot of else happening with the club news-wise, to borrow a phrase from Botch, are we drunk on Daniel Sprong here? He was a fourth liner in Detroit. He averaged 10 minutes and 11 seconds of even strength ice time. That was 12th amongst Red Wings forwards. He averaged a minute 48 on the power play. That was 8th amongst Red Wings forwards. I mean, I don't dispute that he's got the finishing touch that, because he is a shooter and he is a scorer, that could look pretty good alongside JT Miller and Brock Besser, or even Elias Pettersson and Jake DeBrusk. And of course, he is a right shot, and the Canucks don't have a ton of right shots, at least not amongst their scoring of forwards. But I think I'm going to have to be convinced here. He said he was a little upset that he didn't have more interest in free agency. He said that a call with Rick Tocchet was a big determining factor in terms of signing with Vancouver. And Tocchet pointed out that they had a pointed conversation where he asked some pointed questions about why he's bounced around so much. So I think it's a little bit of a project to think of Sprong as a top 6 guy right now, even though he has some of the attributes, some of the traits that would fit there. And of course, as a bottom six guy, he's going to have to be able to, play a regular shift defensively. So it's an interesting signing. I do think perhaps there was some initial enthusiasm from this market that may well be muted come training camp.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of people beating their drums and bongos here. The fact that he scored 18 goals and 21 goals the season before and had 46 and 43 points. I think if you're expecting Daniel Sprong to come in here and rake a lot of goals, I just don't know if that's going to happen. It all depends on where they view him in the lineup, right? Can he be a guy that pushes up and plays in that lineup? Yeah. Do I think he's going to start there? No. I think he's going to be a guy that they can depend on that fourth line. And I remember, I think we said it on Monday, and Jeff or we talked about it, and it was that fourth line last year was a lot of what have you done for me, or what really are you doing when you're out there? Well, you know what you're going to get from Daniel Sprong when he's out there, right? You know what you're going to get from Kiefer Sherwood when he's out there. You're going to get guys that are hard on the puck, guys that are tough to play against. But the knock on Sprong is playing in your own end. So Rick Tocchet and his staff have to try and do a job where they go in and say, okay, let's focus on this part of your game. We think that you're good enough that the points will come eventually, but if you can play within our systems and you can do things with what we can do, and how Tyler Myers kind of turned his game around, how different players, how a guy like Phil DiGiuseppe turned his game around and learned how to play, a Rick Tocchet style of game, then things can go well for him. Another motivating factor that could be in the case is that it's also a contract season for Daniel Sprong. So he's going to want to score some goals. He's going to want to play his best hockey. I mean, he's still young, man. He's 27 years old.
No, I know. He'll wear number 91, previously Nikita Zadorov's. And he said, quote, "I'm hoping Vancouver is not a one-year thing. That's something with the talks we had. It's somewhere that I can see myself being here long-term. And that's what really excited me. I wanted to put myself in a situation where I can be happy and be in a situation where an opportunity is and be a part of a good team and an opportunity for me to be somewhere long-term." And of course, the Vancouver Canucks were able to pitch him on Dakota Joshua and Sam Lafferty and Denny Bluger and all the different guys that they signed that went on to improving themselves and getting more money or more opportunity in free agency, be that with the Vancouver Canucks or be that with another team. Now, when we talk about Sprong, I think we've got to talk about it in the context of what Tocchet was saying at the end of the season, and which he expanded on in this Athletic interview. Now, he acknowledges to Thomas Drance that there does need to be a little more freedom for players to not just dump it in, that he wants to lean into the risk reward of that because they have the personnel. Now, there are several qualifiers here. He talks about, well, no toe drags unless it's JT Brock or Petey, right? So he's not going to be put up with toe drags for anyone who isn't a sublime offensive player, and only after the blue line is secured, he added. He also begins the answer by going to a couple of quote-unquote staples, if you will. He's asked about skill, and he says there's a skill part to getting a puck off the wall or putting yourself in a better position to make a better rush play. That's skill. So he defines skill a little bit more broadly, and yes, some of that involves wall work, but he allows that this is a more mature team, capable of more creativity. And he also says that and this is something else that he has been steadfast on since the end of last season, that he has to come in with a freshness, that if you're asking players to improve and go outside your comfort zone in different areas during the summer training, what you're working on, then he has to do that as a head coach as well. And excellent leadership and professional development from Tocchet. So talked about the freshness of giving them more rope, that he's committed to giving them more rope when it comes to offensive creativity with the puck and what you're doing upon entry at the opposition's blue line. What do you think? What do you think? Is that up Sprong's alley? Is that going to help Sprong? Is that going to help the other guys?
I don't know if it's up Sprong's alley, but I mean, it's nice to hear if you're one of the star players on the team that, your coach is going to give you a little bit more to work with. But Matt, we're sitting here and talking about a team that for a lot of last season, we were thinking that they were going to win the President's Trophy. Like they were a good, they were a good hockey team. So how much more different can you be?
The more he talks about this, the more I commend him for talking about this, commend him for wanting to take the next step. I do believe that the ticket to winning Stanley Cup champion, I mean, you've got to generate more offense than the Canucks did in the second half of last year in the postseason to win a championship. You know, there haven't been many counterattack teams in the history of the league to break through and win Stanley Cups.
Yeah.
In fact, counterattack teams tend to have a ceiling that's below a championship level in most every sport, you know, because that's when the separators are. How much talent, star power do you bring to the fold? And, you know, the Canucks have that. Don't get me wrong, but do they have that in comparison to an Edmonton? You know, do they have that in a comparison to a Florida? We shall see. But yeah, you're quite right. There is a risk here of baby in bathwater, right? Or of just a muddled message, or at least a muddled manifestation of what Tocchet is talking about, to the point where you lose some of that identity. You lose some of those staples that have made you successful.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, with him and his structure and the way that they play, they focus so much on defense, right? And being able to get the puck out of their zone, being able to have clean breakouts and all of that, and the offense will come.
And then in the offensive zone, puck management, don't just shoot for the sake of shooting. We want a quality shot. Don't miss the net and rim it around the board. So, you know, all of that, we sat there and watched it and went, oh, shot totals, shot attempts is so down.
Percentage.
Shot percentage so high. Can all of this maintain? Can they still score enough goals with this sort of approach? And Tocchet very much approached it from no, that's how we're continuing to play team defense, by managing the puck in the offensive zone, creating a lot of zone time, and not caring as much about shot attempts, shots on goals, so long as you have the puck in the offensive zone. Now, he talked about it in this Athletic piece as part of an evolution. He talked about how when him and Foote got here, and, you know, he says he doesn't want to sewer anyone here, but he kind of sewers Bruce and the previous coaching staff. He said they had to fix the defensive system. That was job number one, that there was way too much easy stuff being given up in the defensive zone, too many guys sliding around, too much easy stuff down the seams, cross ice, all of that. So he said they pushed hard to the detriment of the offense, because so much of the focus, so much of the teaching, coaching, and messaging from this coaching staff was how to play without the puck. So he allows for the fact that, yeah, we coached that so hard that it got to the point where we were too passive offensively. And full credit to him, he took responsibility for the Edmonton series. He talked about watching it back, how he was losing his mind because the play here, a play there, and who knows, could be a goal, and maybe that's the difference goal in the game. And of course, the series was awfully close, going 7. So I love the fact that he took ownership for it.
Yeah,
I mean, I think that's very accountable. That's what leaders do. Hitting the right balance surf going forward, though, is going to be really interesting. And look, there will probably be some players who don't get it, right?
Or like
there will probably be some players who just can't achieve what he's looking for, and those will be some of the storylines as we go through the season. Another interesting comment from Tocchet. And boy, if you're Elias Pettersson, how did this land? He said he's really tempted to play Jake DeBrusk with Miller and Besser, saying that DeBrusk is exactly the sort of north-south winger that those guys need. Then he goes on to say, but I know he's got to play with PD because PD needs legitimate wingers. And then he allowed for the fact that who's going to play on that wing, who's going to play left wing with Miller and Besser. He name checks Danton Hyman.
Yep.
He name checks Kiefer Sherwood, which is really interesting. And he name checks Niels Höglander, quote, if he improves his game. What are your thoughts on that? One of those guys lining up. with Miller and Besser.
I think Nils Höglander has to improve his game. Otherwise, that's the only way he's going to make it in the top 6 of this team, let alone on the ice in games, right? I think that, they finally have some depth at the forward position. They finally have some internal competition in looking for who's going to play at that top tier forward group, right? Like Elias Pettersson, right in the middle there. He needs 2 guys on his team, and he needs to be able to drive. He needs to be a leader. He needs to be someone that drives that line. Okay, now you're going to get 2 good players. Now you're going to get 2 guys that aren't Ilya Mikheyev that, just hop on the camel's back and go for a ride. They're not getting those guys anymore. He's getting a guy like Jake DeBrusk where he's hard on the forecheck. He's going to go get pucks for Elias Pettersson. So Elias Pettersson needs to make things happen. Matt, I want to see Jake DeBrusk with JT Miller and Brock Besser.
I mean, yeah. And
Heinen, I believe, can play with Elias Pettersson. People are sleeping on Danton Heinen. I think that he is going to be, of the players that they picked up, yes, they spent the money on Jake DeBrusk, and, you gave Philip Roenick all this money. You went and got those 2 defensemen. I think Danton Heinen is going to be a very important piece for this team this season.
Wow.
I really do.
Hot take.
It's not really that hot. I mean, I think he's that good. I really do. I think that everywhere he's played, guys have loved the way love the way that he plays the game. He sees the game at a different level, and he's so versatile and can play up and down the lineup.
Well, and Talkett hit on exactly that, Irv, that the new guys can play up and down the lineup.
Yeah.
He also noted that several of them, well, pretty much all of them outside of Jake DeBrusk, are on show me deals.
Yep.
And I do wonder if that's going to be a big benefit for the Vancouver Canucks, that you've got hungry guys on show me deals that know there is ice time available for them in the top 6. Like, that should be the perfect storm to get the best out of somebody, whether it's a Danton Heinen, whether it's a Daniel Sprong, whether it's a Nils Höglander, probably a less likely Kiefer Sherwood, but just because I'm not necessarily sure the full offensive game is there. But you have a number of wingers with different profiles, but similar circumstances in terms of where they are in their careers, where they stand to be financially with the next contract, and if they are hungry enough and make enough improvements in certain areas where there are some plum assignments available to them beside the likes of JT Miller and Brock Besser or Elias Pettersson. And I do wonder whether that will be one of the things that helps push this Canucks operation forward in the second full year of Rick Tocchet, and maybe compensates and makes up for a little bit of what they're trying to do and potentially some struggles in terms of trying to loosen the reins while still maintaining that terrific defensive posture. Because let's remember, as great as Thatcher Demko was, as good as Casey DeSmith was, particularly early as a backup goaltender, and as excellent a job as Archer Shilovs did in very tough circumstances in the Stanley Cup playoffs, the Vancouver Canucks achieved what they achieved last season, best team in the Pacific Division through 82, because they played exceptional team defense. Irf. 5-man defensive units. The penalty kill made big improvements. The goaltending was still solid. So they really hit the hat trick of defensive metrics, if you will. 5-on-5 in-strength team, penalty kill, goaltending. They had it all.
Yep.
Last year. And if any of that wanes, then you're going to need to score more goals. And we'll see if this team is capable of scoring more goals. The Young Stars Classic. The game schedule has now been announced for the South Okanagan Event Center. Beautiful Penticton, British Columbia. So the Friday night, Canucks usually play the Friday night of the Young Stars tournament. They will do so this year against Calgary, Friday, September 15th, 7:30 p.m. The Canucks will play the Saturday night as well against the Edmonton Oilers Young Stars at 7:30 p.m. And then they will play the final game of the tournament on Monday afternoon at 1:30 against the Winnipeg Jets Young Stars. So there is your schedule for the SOEC in Penticton from September 13th to the 16th. So at least the Canucks schedule if you're heading up to Young Stars. And of course, training camp will be later that week in Penticton. Speaking of young players, and of course, you'll see a lot of Abbey Canucks from the Canucks cohort at Young Stars. The Abbotsford Canucks, they've signed a local product here. Leighton Ahak, North Van kid. Signs with Abbey, played for the Prince George outfit in the BC Hockey League, the Spruce Kings. Played at Ohio State University, was drafted by the Vegas Golden Knights. He's a big left shot defenseman, and he's coming home to play for the Abbotsford Canucks. Canucks Army Cody Severson reports that Dmitry Zolotiev's time with the Abbotsford Canucks is done. He was the 6th-round pick in 2020. He's going back to the KHL, his native Russia, where he will be on a team with ex-Canuck prospect Cole Castles. So there you go, some maneuvering down at the AHL level. And then Jim Rutherford noted on that Bob McCown podcast interview, they are making headway on a practice facility.
Yep.
Count me skeptical.
Yep, I agree. I think that, I think PJ wrote something last week about it or the week before, and I kind of checked in a little bit. They were at the same place as they kind of were last season, where there's nothing really been going on. They're checking out places. They like places. I think it's going to be difficult to try and do something and one, find land and build yourself. Two, if you're going to a UBC, or I don't think SFU is going to happen at all. I think if it's a UBC and you go and build something of your own, UBC is going to want to share some of that. They're going to want to share some of your new toys. They're going to want to share some of the ice. They're going to want to share some of the infrastructure that you've put in. So maybe, I don't know if that's going to be far or things like that, but their best bet is to try and build their own. I just don't know where they're going to do it. That's the problem.
You have a lot of relationship. You talk to a lot of players. How much do players talk about this? Like, how much of an issue is this for NHL players?
I think for a lot of it, it's interesting, right? Because some guys just don't want to be going 40 minutes away for a practice facility, or 25 minutes away. I mean, UBC you can probably get to in 15, 20, depending on where you live here in Vancouver. But it's interesting. Like the Edmonton Oilers, they built that new rink. They go to the rink, and their practice rink is right beside it. Even if there's a concert, their practice rink is right beside it.
Yep.
Right. And you look at some other organizations, their practice rinks aren't too far from where they actually play, but they have their own. The Leafs have their own. The Montreal Canadiens, I believe, do have their own. Ottawa has its own.
Which is very close to the
Calgary Flames, they don't.
They're building theirs.
They're building theirs,
in fact, plans.
So you look at it around the National Hockey League, like every Canadian team does, except for the Vancouver Canucks. Now, they do get a lot of ice time at home, but once this calendar turns and it gets into summer concert season and into playoff season, you're out at UBC practicing. You don't want that. Yeah. You want to be in the confines of your own home. So as much as, it's interesting, you say you're skeptical, but I think that they're kind of still at the same places they were last season, where they're still kind of looking, they're still trying to figure out what they want to do.
Remember PJ mentioned somewhere around the airport, perhaps, to help with their travel schedule, somewhere closer to UBC, Father Bauer Arena upgrades or some sort. There seems to be kind of on that west side of.
Well, that's because that's where a lot of the players live, right? Like the players typically live in Yaletown, Dunbar, Point Grey, like that sort of.
Gosh, JT Miller might have to take a helicopter.
JT Miller would be the outlier in West Vancouver. Yeah. Yeah. And I've always, and mostly just to argue with Blake, because that's what I do. But, Blake always talks about how it has to be close. And I always say, well, the New York Rangers facility is in Rye, New York.
Yeah.
Like, it is not particularly close, quote unquote, to Manhattan, which is where a lot of the players live, although, some players live on the jerseys. And he said, wow, that's New York City. That's different.
He's got a point, I think.
You think?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think he's got a point. I also think that,
because I'm like, well, okay, you want to play in Vancouver and live in this glorious city and blah, blah, blah. We've got an ocean here that makes.
Yeah.
So we have to deal with bridges. It's part of the charms, if you will, or frustrations of living here in Vancouver, is from time to time that, getting from point A to point B is going to be more difficult because of things out of your control. Heck, got a call from a friend on the North Shore Saturday. Matt, do you want our Whitecaps tickets? Lionsgate's closed and we got zero chance of making this game. So, I always, look at it in terms of that point of view that, look, there is a precedent there in the NHL where the Rangers getting their practice facility is a pretty big effort. Why not here in Vancouver, especially based on the geographic challenges we have? But Blake always tells me, no, that works in New York. That wouldn't work here. And you're agreeing.
Yeah, I would agree.
Blake.
I think it's got to be close. I think it's got to be 15, 20 minutes tops in traffic. I think it's going to be on this side.
15, 20 minutes tops in traffic in this city?
I mean, you can get from Yaletown to UBC in 20.
Okay. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
these guys are showing up at 7:38 in the morning for treatment. They don't get on the ice till 11.
Mhm.
You're leaving the rink if you're at a practice facility 1:30 by the time media's done, maybe a little treatment at 2. Like, you're not really driving during those prime traffic times.
Yep. Fair enough. Fair enough. And you're going the other way in a lot of cases.
Going the other way. Yeah.
Okay.
So I think that, there's an appetite for that west side if you can find something there.
It's got to be west side. Yeah. I mean, if that is if that is a canon of what you're doing here, if that is fundamental, then it has to be west side.
I mean, or it's Concord Pacific, but I don't think that's ever going to happen
there
across
you
the
go.
street, right?
Patrick has reported on this recently too.
Yeah.
So this is exciting. Our friends at the Daily Face-Off and Gatorade Canada expanding their roster, welcoming Connor Bedard to the team to pay homage to the number of bottles that Connor pops with that shot off the back of the net. Gatorade Canada is partnering with the Daily Face-Off and you and Connor Bedard to give you a chance to win one of 98 signed Connor Bedard Gatorade squeeze bottles. So go to dailyfaceoff.com. You'll see the Daily Face-Off Connor Bedard giveaway presented by Gatorade Canada. You enter there by clicking the link in the bio, entering your contact details. Of course, good idea to follow Gatorade Canada on Instagram. This contest is open until July 31st at 11:59 p.m. Eastern time. It's open to Canadian residents, excluding those in Quebec. You got to be 13 plus here, a chance to win a Connor Bedard Gatorade, signed Gatorade bottle. What's your prescription for Bedard in year 2? Of course, broke the jaw and so missed a big, and of course, we haven't seen him here yet. At Rogers Arena, the pride of North fans. So we're going to see him here this year. One would hope, unless he's injured again.
He's here twice.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Do you think he can take a massive step forward this year? Like, do you think we can be talking about a kid who is in the Art Ross race in March? Is that a little too much? Is that a little too much because of the team he's playing on?
Yeah, but the team he's playing on, they weren't healthy last year, so he had to carry the brunt of the load, and he wasn't really playing with that many good players, and he still put up 22 goals in his rookie season, right?
What games did he wind up playing?
Connor Bedard played 68.
60, yeah.
68 games, 22, 39 for 61.
Right.
Minus 40, minus 44.
Yeah, wow. Yeah. I mean, so he missed 14 games, and I'm gonna give him the benefit of the doubt that after he broke the jaw, like, things got a little more real there. So I'm gonna guess he's gonna be stronger for it in the long run.
I think when you go and you look at the depth chart now of the Chicago Blackhawks, top line Bertuzzi, Bedard, and Teravainen, it's not bad, right? And you got Taylor Hall, Anthony Ciu, Phil Kurashev, who's going to be a very, very good hockey player. He already is. Ilya Mikheyev on that team as well.
Dickinson,
he's not going to score though, but Dickinson was their best player when everyone was hurt. He could have been their all-star representative, right?
Jason Dickinson, everybody. The Canucks gave away a second-round pick to shed the contract.
Yeah, I mean, their defense,
but hey,
Korchinski's good. The Seth Jones question kind of remains there as to what it's going to be. But yeah, I think that Connor Bedard has all the potential in the world. I really do.
I think they got better.
Oh yeah, they did. 100% they did.
Yeah. So I put it this way. I think Art Ross is probably a bridge too far in year 2, but 80 plus points easily.
I mean,
if he stays healthy, I think 80 plus points easily.
I think that's the benchmark. I think you have to, like, even that's your expectation. Like, I mean, you're not expecting him to go McKinnon or Kucherov just yet with those point totals and things like that. But the evolution of his game and the way that we know how much he takes care of his body to get ready to play the game at a high level, it's going to be fun to watch him this year.
Yeah, Bertuzzi, Teravainen, maybe one of the young forwards also steps up. So I think Nazar is an interesting player.
Yeah.
One-time first-round pick. So, yeah, I think you're looking at an 80-point player. And heck, if he flirted with 100, I'm not sure that would surprise me either if he stays healthy this year. 1 week, actually less than a week, from the Major League Baseball trade deadline. And a reminder, you want to follow our friends Nick Paololog and Adam Peddle. They host Bad for Baseball here on the Nation Network. It is an unapologetic, in-your-face baseball podcast that delivers weekly unfiltered takes on the good and bad around Major League Baseball and the world of baseball. Blue Jays Focus Pod whispers that the Seattle Mariners and Jays had talked about Vladdy Guerrero. Doesn't sound like it's going to happen. Also whispers that Seattle might be going, oh, maybe we're not as good as we think we are, finding more excuses as to not for not going for it again this year. Anyways, promises to be a busy week here around Major League Baseball with the trade deadline coming up. There are some really big names that are being floated around, including, some high-end pitchers available. Bad for Baseball, wherever you get your podcasts. All right, let's get to today's menu. It is brought to you by Greta Bar, 50 West Cordova. A quick walk to the Rinkers Stadium, go-to spot for food, drink, fun before, after the game. Make it a game night at Greta at 50 West Cordova or at gretabar.com. John Shannon is going to join us here after he and Bob McCown conducted that interview with Jim Rutherford yesterday on their podcast. And our audio today was courtesy of the Bob McCown podcast. We talked to John about everything they discussed with Jim Rutherford. Boy, was this fun. So much fun. Men in Blazers.
Oh, yeah. That was good.
If you're not familiar with Men in Blazers, it is the #1 North American soccer-focused media network. In 10 years, they have gone from, two English guys talking soccer to this massive media company. They've got an event Thursday at the Hollywood Theater in Kitts, Men in Blazers with Wrexham FC. Of course, Wrexham FC is here, owned by Vancouver's own Ryan Reynolds, to play the Whitecaps in a friendly at BC Place on the weekend. And so today we were delighted to be joined by one half of the Men in Blazers, Roger Bennet, who is on his way to Vancouver here to host the event at the Hollywood Theater on Thursday night. You can get your tickets at hollywoodtheater.ca. Men in Blazers presents Wrexham AFC Live on stage. They'll have the manager there. They'll have the executive director. There will be some players there on stage. And we had a terrific conversation with Roger with regards to, the rise of his podcast and his media network, the rise of Wrexham as a little itty-bitty Welsh team that is making its way up, not to mention, burrowing into the hearts after the reality series. We talk about the state of soccer in North America because he was here when we first saw the World Cup hit North American shores in 1994 and everything that's transpired in the 30 years since, including Jesse Marsh's impact on the Canadian national team. And yes, he's aware of the scandal burning Canadian soccer. He's quick with a quip there. We get to that story as well on the podcast side a little later in the program. All right, Bet365 Bets of the Day. This segment brought to you by Bet365, proud partner of Sekeres Price. Irf, gonna let you go first here. What are you liking from the Bet365 menu?
I'm not gonna go Olympics till Friday. So I'm gonna go the starting of the 3M Open out in Minneapolis, or it's in Minnesota. So I'm gonna go.
Yeah, it's Minneapolis.
Minneapolis. Yeah.
Yep.
Sahith Theegala, JT Poston, Canadian Adam Hadwin, and Akshay Bhatia, all to finish in the top 40.
Wow.
So you put all those together, $25 returns you 188 plus 655.
Hadwin's got to pick it up here.
Yeah, he does.
Hadwin is
that was the only one that I was worried about.
Theegala, I think he learned an Open Championship lesson. Guy who hits a very high ball, and I think he learned a thing or two about links golf at Troon. So I'm sure he'll be quite happy to see a North American style golf course. I like Bhatia. It's a lefty.
Yeah.
So I'm immediately with him.
Yeah.
Yes. I like it. I am going Olympics. The over-under for gold medals for Canada in Paris is 5.5. Now, with the help of our buddy Ben Steiner, who is covering the Olympics for CBC, part of the Nation Network here with the Northern Football Podcast. So I've been going back and forth with Ben this week, looking at the different Canadian medal hopefuls. And I've got a list of 41. Now, not all of them are going to come through. And of course, not all of them are realistic gold medal hopes. But hear me out, Irf. Summer McIntosh, at least one gold medal, right? Maybe a couple. Phil Kim, Phil Wizard, the breakdancing world champion from Vancouver. This is a new event.
Let's bring it home the gold.
Phil's favored to win. So I'm going there. Nanaimo's Ethan Katzberg in the hammer throw, favored to win.
Hammer.
Maud Charon, the weightlifter, one of 2 Canadian flag bearers announced today, world champion herself. So very good gold medal possibility there. Sarah Mitten in the shot put. She's from Nova Scotia. She's been terrific in this event. That makes 5. And then, where could the surprises be? Gabby Dabrowski is one of the best doubles players in the world. She's got 2 cracks, one with Leila Annie Fernandez in the women's doubles, one with Felix Auger-Aliassime in the mixed doubles. There's Richmond's Cameron Rogers in the hammer throw. And then, sure, if women's soccer is going to be able to overcome and repeat as gold medal champions, we got a canoe sprint athlete who's got a couple of cracks. So, if I can get to 5 or 6 that I feel good about and then allow for some surprises, I know there's some sprinkle of hope here, but I'm going over 5.5 gold medals for Canada at the Paris Olympics. $138 bet pays out at $100. That's your Bet365 bets of the day. Open an account with Bet365 today. Bet on a huge range of markets. So whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Use code VANBONUS. John Shannon coming up next. Hockey season may be over, but it's always a great time at Greta.
Air hockey season is never over.
Right.
And at Greta, it's the best air hockey table around, but all the best games. So never mind waiting for somebody else to stage something in Vancouver for you this summer. You can stage your own thing. The fun is always there at Greta.
A quick walk to the rink or stadium. It's a go-to spot before the game, after the game. Make it a game night at Greta, 50 West Cordova, or at gretabar.com. This guest is the former executive producer of Hockey Night in Canada, the co-host of the Bob McCown podcast, and we're lucky to have you, John Shannon, because a terrific interview you and Bob did with Canucks President of Hockey Operations, Jim Rutherford.
Well, first of all, it is always great to be with Irf. Let me just say that it is always great to be with Irf. And it was great to be with Jimmy. As you know, Matt, I have a long relationship with Jim. Going back to, I hate to admit it, but his playing days. And so we've always kept in contact, whether it be in Hartford or in Carolina or Pittsburgh. And when he went to Vancouver, that was a natural succession to the conversation. And he's always been very giving of his time to Bob and me. He was, and I'll tell you what, just as an aside, one of the reasons is he used to always drive from Pittsburgh to Toronto to visit his mother.
I remember these stories.
and he turned on sports radio in Toronto and listened to Bob McCown from 4 to 7 on the drive home. And so he's always had a soft spot for McCown. And I think that showed on the interview on Tuesday.
What have you perceived any changes in the way he communicates now that he's in a Canadian market as opposed to back in the day when he was in Pittsburgh or Raleigh?
I think he understands the difference now. I think he understands the pressure now. But I don't think that has changed any way his dealing with the media or dealing with the fans. I think his approach to building a hockey club is the same as it was in all of those cities. But let's just say I think he's more aware of his environment.
Where do you think he's at with building his hockey club, John? I mean, there were so many different topics that you guys hit in that interview. I guess my question to you is, what stood out the most for you? Like, what are you taking away from what he had to say?
Well, it was something. We can sit and talk about JT Miller, and I didn't even get to ask him the question, which is ancient history in Vancouver now. Is they had to make that hard decision between Horvat and Miller, and they made it proved to be for them. They made the right one. But I think it was the question about Thatcher Demco. I think that when you sit and talk about this is an elite goaltender, this is a Vezina nominee, but can he stay healthy? And because let me ask you, Irf, if Demko had been healthy, would the Canucks have gone farther? And I think they might have. That's not a knock at what DeSmith did. That's certainly not a knock at what Shelovs did. But Thatcher Demko's a better goalie, and the challenge now for the organization, particularly Ian Clark, is to keep Demko healthy. And I think that was the one thing that came out of it, that they're looking at changing his practice routine. He says he practiced too hard. So from that perspective, I think that's important.
Matt and
Did he sound worried to you, John? For those who missed the interview, how did Demko come up, and how worried did he sound about all this?
Well, I mean, have you ever heard Jimmy worried? honestly, I don't think you hear Jim Rutherford ever worried. And I don't think he is worried. I just think that he's very pragmatic about it. It came up because I asked him, I said, you've got a great goaltender, but can he stay healthy? And so, he's going to be an American Olympian. He's going to be part of their team probably for the Frozen Four next year. So, he's a big factor, not just for Vancouver, but for American hockey. And to stay healthy is so bloody important for all of that. And you remember the conversations before and after in the last 2 years, Demko's injury. Everybody in town knew about it. It was deflating to know that, no Demko. Oh, what are we going to do now? I mean, holy. And so I think that he talked about being cautious with him. And I don't think that was worry. I just think that was him being very practical about it.
On a more broad scale, you mentioned the Four Nations and what's going to be happening there. And obviously Thatcher Demko being a big part of that American team. Do you think that NHL teams will try, and I'm going to use Thatcher Demko as an example, but he's going to be a part of that team, but the workload that he's going to get when he goes there, is there going to be some sort of discussion with the teams and their superstar players, especially if they view themselves as cup contenders?
Well, I don't think so, because I think that, it's replacing the All-Star game. The effort's going to be a little higher than what we've seen at All-Star games, but it's going to be comparable to what we're going to see at the Olympics the following year. And once you put the flag on, or for any of those four countries next February, and for how many countries are going to be in the Olympics in 26, once you put the colors on, once you wear the flag, you forget about your club team for 2 weeks. You do. You forget about your club team for 2 weeks and hope you don't get hurt.
He spoke on Elias Pettersson as well, with regards to the lack of time and space in the playoffs and the learning. It sounded very much like he was trying to build Pettersson up after what was a, let's face it, difficult postseason, and then perhaps an even more difficult end of year media session with him and talking.
Wow. And when you consider that there seemed to be a little bit of a disagreement about how hurt Elias was in the playoffs. But again, that to me, Matt, it's funny when I asked that question, I almost knew the answer before he said it. He's not predictable, but he'll reinforce what he needs to reinforce. And Pettersson is so much a big part of what this team's going to be, not just for 1 year, but for 8 now. And you can only hope that learning curve that Jim talked about gets reinforced. And by the way, not just in the playoffs, in the regular season too. You look at his numbers. His numbers were more than respectable, but he could be a dynamic force. And I think we talked about this during the playoffs, Matt. When you saw what JT Miller, how he elevated his game in the playoffs, there has to be an expectation that Elias Pettersson can elevate to that level too. And so the learning curve, yes, about the tight checking and close quarters, but just paying attention to your teammates, I think for Pettersson might be the biggest thing. When you saw what Pettersson, what Miller did, I mean, one game in Nashville, there were 3 opportunities late in the game, and Miller was involved in all 3, and they were in 3 different zones of the ice. I mean, that's what playoff hockey's all about, and hopefully Elias will learn a little bit of that.
Yeah, I think it was difficult. I think the learning experience, right? The bubble was the bubble, and it was no fans and nothing like that. But you go into enemy territory such as Edmonton and obviously Nashville, things were completely different. John, tell me why Daniel Sprong is going to work here. Everywhere he's played, he seems to have worked, but he's played in a lot of places.
Yes, because he has faults.
Yeah.
He has. I remember watching him play in the Q, and he had a major league shot in the Q. He was by far the best shooter in that league that year. But what I would tell you though is that in junior hockey, he had a bad attitude. He thought he was better than anybody else. and for the first 2 years in the National Hockey League, that kind of got projected around his teammates, his teams, and people got impatient with it. I think that he's one of those guys that you get into your mid to late 20s, you start to learn how to play the professional game, know your strengths, and if he can learn to play in his own zone, because by the way, if he doesn't learn to play in his own zone, he's in the press box.
He's not playing.
He's not playing. Yeah, right. And Rick Tocchet will ensure that. But Sprong has every attribute to be a contributor, particularly on the power play. And as when we talked about last week, who's going to be on that wing, Jim called him a mid forward, like top 6 and not necessarily bottom 3. I'm not convinced of that as much as he might be at this point, but this goes to, them always trying to churn the water and finding somebody that can help the club. And you know what? There might be another guy coming. You never know. There might be somebody else that they can go and say, okay, we're going to give him a chance. And that's, I think that's one of Alvin and Rutherford's best traits is that they don't stop thinking about how to make the team better.
Yeah, and which brings me to the next question, John. Didn't quite get the elite winger they hoped for, although Jake DeBrusk may well be that guy or a close facsimile. A top 4 defenseman. We're all wondering now, okay, you have all these wingers. Is another move coming? Are they looking to package guys to see if they can land a top 4 defenseman? What do you think? They have their eyes on yet another big move this summer?
I'm not convinced of that. I think that they might take a chance with all those darn condors they have on the back, and start the season that way and say, can our big bodies be a difference maker around Quinn Hughes? So I'm not convinced. And with the money they spent on Hronek already, I think that they might be a little more settled on the blue line than most people think.
My friend,
but as you know, season starts the 12th of October. By the 28th of October, Patrick and Jimmy get itchy.
I was gonna say, like they both seem itchy at all times,
especially if they start the way they did last year again.
Right.
Crazy.
Switching gears here, Rick Tocchett's done an interview with The Athletic where he talked about, he's got to come back with a fresh approach that if he asks the players to get better, dig in the summer, improve areas of weaknesses, that he is going to do the same thing. What are your thoughts here? Because they had so much success with Tocchet preaching certain staples, and a lot of that was conservative hockey in terms of turning the puck over and dumping it in rather than trying to make a play to carry it in. It affected their offense somewhat, but it was also the secret of their success. How much fiddling would you think is too much fiddling? What would be your concern level that we throw out baby with bathwater here?
I think it's all pointing to a similar topic we had about 10 minutes ago, and that was how to get more out of guys like Pettersson. And I think if Rick Tocchet has to be, or is expected to be open-minded about making change, then that's the message that's being sent through the dressing room. And that all those guys there are certain guys, you know, that will always give you everything. And there are going to be those guys that they are, you know, in their end of season meetings, they said, you know what, here's what we need out of you next year. Here's how better you have to be. And we want you to be part of the future here. And I just think what Rick said in the article, which was a really good interview. I just thought he was saying what was the obvious thing in order to try to get a message to all the team. Keep an open mind, be flexible. We're going to have to learn to play hockey more than one way, and that's an important thing.
Lastly, John, there's a new general manager in Edmonton where ex-Blackhawks GM Stan Bowman gets the post to work with Jeff Jackson. Many here are critical of this move, not believing that Bowman deserves another chance after being a party to the cover-up of the sexual abuse scandal with the Blackhawks. What are your thoughts on all this?
Well, I did have a conversation with Jeff 7 or 10 days ago about this. His attitude was that in looking for a manager, he was told that Stan Bowman is eligible to work, and if you take, and I know it's difficult to do, if you take the Kyle Beach episode or problem or issue or controversy out of the picture in Chicago, what kind of job did Stan Bowman do? And then if you say, well, he was a good general manager, and that's step one. Step two is you have to ask, do people deserve second chances? Do people has Stan Bowman paid enough of a price? Has he been punished enough? You know, emotionally, financially, career-wise, to sit out for 3 years? Has he paid enough of a price and hopefully has been rehabilitated? And I say that after listening to Sheldon Kennedy talk about it. So I've always been a believer in second chances. I've had about 12. And I think that Stan Bowman deserves a second chance.
Then there's also the question, is he the best person for the job?
Well, that's it. That's
Well, they got to win.
They got to, and so then you wonder what is the job description? I made no bones about it. I thought Mark Hunter would be a better guy. I thought Mark Hunter was the guy because of his background and play development and the way the organizational structure at Edmonton might work with Jeff Jackson being so hands-on as the president. That it makes sense then to go find somebody who could be an evaluator. They already have a really good capologist. They already have a really good assistant general manager. You know, Keith Gretzky and Bill Scott can manage a lot of the paperwork. I assume Stan will learn and understand that. But in the end, Jeff, he made no bones about it. He said, you know, Stan Bowman is cleared to work, and he's got a great resume. And hopefully people will be as difficult as it may be, and it's a difficult discussion to have. Hopefully people will understand what Stan has gone through over the last 3 years as well.
Great stuff, John. We thank you for the time here today. Fantastic interview with Rutherford. We deeply enjoyed. Catch up soon, my friend.
And as I said, it's always great.
Always great to work with her.
Thanks, Bob.
Ditto. I concur.
The Vancouver Canadians are back at the net. Catch fireworks, giveaways, and Friday nooners all spring and summer long. Get your tickets at CanadiansBaseball.com.
Our next guest is one half of the most popular Men in Blazers media network, the #1 soccer-focused media company in North America. They reach 30 million people a year, and on Thursday, they will be at the Hollywood Theater in Kitsilano for a special live show, Wrexham AFC Live, and it's our pleasure to welcome Roger Bennet of Men in Blazers to the program. Roger, thanks for making time.
Gents, it's a joy to be with you. I cannot wait. I'm hurtling towards the airport to catch a plane to your magical kingdom of Vancouver and to be on stage at the Hollywood Theatre tomorrow night with Wrexham, with the players, the stars, really the heroes of the epic Greek poem that is Wrexham's Rise, with a local Van City Reynolds is just the joy of a lifetime.
Have you been to our city before, Roger?
I have. I've worked with EA Sports, who are that pulsating powerhouse, really, to me, that made North America fall in love with the game of football. They're the silent hand that's grown the game in the United States. I've come out many times, but it is the kind of city that thrills me like a kid when I'm thinking about arriving there. It is utterly stunning, and I can't wait to be with you.
And we see you got your Vancouver Millionaires hat on as well. Nice touch, sir.
Godspeed. I've got a huge bag of hats, thanks to 47. But this is one of my favorites. V for Vancouver, V for victory. You keep flying those drones over opponents' training fields, and victory is ensured. I love you, Canada.
I didn't think we were going to get to that until a little bit later in the interview. Well, let's have at it. Early thoughts, my friend. Early thoughts.
I love it. I love it. Now you're a proper football nation. Everyone's doing it. It's only cheating when you get caught. And I just wonder how you're feeling, because I know Canadians. And by the way, this women's team is amazing. It's just full of poet warriors like Janine Becky. I mean, they are just phenomenal human beings. But I know when you think about it, you probably feel both a little bit proud and a little bit dirty.
Well, yes, very much so. But what is the age-old saying? If you're not cheating, you're not trying, or something like that. Roger, but I think when you look at it as a whole, obviously the players, you got to feel for them, and then whatever's going to happen with FIFA and the rest of it, we'll definitely see that in due course. I kind of wanted to ask you and go back a little bit with you and Men in Blazers and kind of the idea to get the ball rolling. Was it something that you'd been working on for a long time, or something that kind of just came up and you decided to just take the reins and run with it?
Look, we're living in incredible times in North America with football, this sport. I moved here in 1994. The World Cup then was in the United States. It was meant to put football over the top in this nation. It's still the best attended World Cup of all time, but it was like a circus that came and left. And instead of football becoming, the next big thing, it was always the sport of the future. That's changed World Cup to World Cup. And in 2006, I was watching ESPN's broadcast, and the commentator said, the world's most famous footballer, Charlie Beckham, takes the field. And I just screamed at my television. I was like, oh my God, if only they had someone who knew about the game talking about it, this sport would go like that. And my wife, God love her, she's like, why don't you get off the couch and go and do it yourself? And we did. Podcasting was just in its infancy. The next World Cup, we covered it. And the sport has grown dramatically for reasons we can talk about, both here and in Canada. And in 2026, the Men's World Cup is coming to United States, Canada, and Mexico. There's going to be 7 games in Vancouver. It's going to finish the job that 1994 started. And our network has grown from one podcast to 14 different hosts. There's a burgeoning women's side of the operation, run by Sam Mewis, the World Cup winner who had to retire cruelly early. The women's game, where we cover every kick of the ball there. We're growing the Hispanic properties with Hercules Gomez, who played in Liga MX and for the US men's national team. Jesse Marsh, your beloved Canadian men's national team host, is a regular guest. And football now is about to stop being the sport of the future and be the sport of the now. And that's really the wave that we've ridden, gents.
Well, if you shout Jesse Marsh, we would need to ask you about Canada's performance at the Copa, Roger. What did you make of it, and what do you think it did for soccer in terms of growing the sport in Canada and the US?
Well, you guys are better positioned to tell the second part than I am. I think the world of Jesse Marsh. Look, there's the same for Canada as there is in the United States. Coaching remains the one great backwater. There's so much talent. Your Canadian team is dizzying in terms of individual talent that you can call up. I think they are a phenomenon to watch, those human beings. I think, honestly, they to me, outside, they look like the greatest face of the Canadian nation, just diverse, dizzying, electric, kinetic, joyful. I marvel at them. And the one backwater is coaching. We just do not have many on the men's side human beings who are brave enough to go to Europe where coaching is elite and test themselves as assistant coaches and grind their way up to the top. And as a result, just staying here, we're on the backwater of football coaching. It's not where the sharpened ideas are being taught. Jesse is one of the few men who was brave enough to go over to Europe and test himself. I admire him greatly. I think his journey has been filled with tenacity, perseverance, incredible moments, trying moments. He wanted to be the American coach. There is no doubt. He's been very open about that. There's nothing more motivational in life than spite. Watching him go up north, take the reins of your Canadian team, charge into the semi-final deliriously at the Copa, while our US team crapped out in the group stage. You tell me how that felt, because I can only project, but it must have been magnificent.
Well, it is, Roger, and I'll tell you this: rivalries grow sport, and because Canada has been able to step up at a time when maybe the United States has maintained level, and maybe Mexico has taken a step backwards, we have a proper North American rivalry here between the three nations.
It's what we need. It's what we need. I mean, Mexico are having a generational lull in performance. So it's exactly what the men's team need over here. We're playing in September. I cannot wait. And I think, I'm not sure about this, but I think Canada got to annex Wisconsin, didn't they? When Jesse Marsh became the national team manager, didn't that happen automatically?
A lot of money came in to the program. Yes.
And the U.S. national, you didn't mention it, but the U.S. national team program's kind of in a little bit of shambles right now, aren't they?
I'd say we're on the way up is probably the way that I would coach it. We're having a moment. I believe deeply in the future of this US team. We'd love yours back if you don't mind lending him to us. But in the meantime, we'll find our own. And this rivalry, the Canadian-United States rivalry, I think is the best thing for both nations because steel sharpens steel.
What have you made of the Wrexham story and the way it has been told the world over, Roger?
It's incredible. It's incredible. The world is full of chaos. It's dark, full of challenge. And Wrexham, I grew up in Liverpool, which is like 40 minutes from Wrexham. And like Wrexham, was similarly kind of economically bereft, left to cut adrift in the post-industrial Britain, while the South got rich and the North, the coal mines shut, the steel mills shut, the cotton mills were shut down. See Ryan Reynolds charged with McElhenney and not just transform a football club and a fan base and what they believe is possible, not just in football but in life, but change the whole town. I think it's football at its best, which is when it transcends football and is delirious. It's an optimistic thing. It's a joyful thing. And to be able to celebrate that story, which to me is like watching an epic Greek poem unfurl itself in real time, to be able to go on the Hollywood Theatre in Vancouver and tell the story with the players that have made it happen is the honor of a lifetime.
Yeah, tell us, you'll have particulars on it. Tell us more about the event, Roger. I understand a magical night living out the greatest piece of Wrexham storytelling North America has ever seen.
I can't wait. There's so many Wrexham fans in town. They're coming to drink all your beers, Vancouver. And we'll be live on stage with the manager, Phil Parkinson, who is kind of like the Rudyard Kipling poem, if come to life. If you can keep your head while all around you are losing theirs and blaming it on you. We'll have Humphrey Carr, who is from the front office. If you watch the show, he's like essentially posh English Yao Ming. He's about 6'7". He's amazing. He's just a joyful man who is a fish out of water leading that team. All I can say is we will have a number of the players, a number of the stars. I'm not allowed to say who yet because they're trying to catch a plane up from San Francisco, and we'll only know exactly when they land. But it'll be a night of celebration, a night of reveling in all that's best about sports and reliving their back-to-back promotions, the feelings, the emotions, and then getting ready for all that is to come as they mount their attack on League One, which will be a whole new challenge, a whole new level. And I think is really doable as they march onwards. It's really, God bless. Please God, they'll continue their journey.
So you might not be able to tell us, but is Van City Reynolds in the middle of his big Hollywood promo tour? Is he going to make an appearance, Roger?
You know, this is like Kaiser Soze. This is where you get killed for saying the wrong things. So I have no idea. I'm just a humble peasant, just football loving peasant. I love life. I love my family. I love my dog. So I will say you should probably ask Rob McElhenney. Ask people who are way above my pay grade.
Gotcha. Yeah, just a humble Liverpudlian covering football.
I'm just an infantryman, just watching everything unfold from the front lines.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Men in Blazers and Wrexham FC, Thursday, July 25th. That's tomorrow at the Hollywood Theatre. The doors at 7, the show at 8. You can get your tickets, hollywoodtheatre.ca. And then, of course, the big friendly match on the weekend where Wrexham plays our Vancouver Whitecaps FC. Roger, this has been a delight. Thank you for the time, my friend. Have a great show on Thursday. Enjoy your time in Vancouver, and we'll catch up.
Thank you. Come and have a couple of beers with us. What's the best breakfast in Vancouver, guys?
Oh, probably something healthy.
With what you're going to assuming you're going to need something heavy.
Mm-hmm. We'll send you in the way of a greasy full English somewhere in town, Roger.
Thanks, guys. Courage.
Hey, everybody, if you're enjoying what you're seeing here, then follow along with Sekeres Price on YouTube. I promise more content coming.
The kids call it subscribe on YouTube.
Well, how about liking it?
Do that as well. Smash it right now.